The dollar bill was still warm in Boone Carter's pocket when he knew he'd made the stupidest trade of his life. For 37 years, he'd lived by the code of the territory. And the first rule, the only rule that really mattered, was you never ever give up your horse. Not for a pouch of gold, not for a barrel of water, and sure as hell not for a single crumpled dollar bill. But there he stood. He watched his only horse, his last ticket out of this God-forsaken dust bowl, disappear over the ridge. On its back was a wounded Apache girl he didn't even know. That horse was meant to carry him to town tomorrow. That horse was the money for a train ticket east, a one-way ride away from his failing ranch and the ghost that haunted it. Now it was gone. The girl had been half dead when he found her, slumped against a rock with blood seeping through a bandage on her leg. Any decent man would have helped, but a smart man would have put her on the back of his horse and taken her to the doctor himself. Not Boone. He gave her the horse. He gave her everything. Maybe it was the desperate hope in her eyes when she pressed that dollar into his hand. Maybe it was the way she whispered, "Thank you," like she'd forgotten the word existed. Or maybe, just maybe, he saw himself in her. He saw the same look of a person backed into a corner, fighting for one last breath. The same look he saw in his own reflection every morning. Now he had a 20-mile walk home. He had blisters forming on his feet. And he had a single dollar to show for the most valuable thing he owned. He had no way of knowing who that girl was. He had no way of knowing her father was the great Chief Takakota, and he had no way of knowing that his single stupidest decision was about to change his life and the fate of the entire valley forever. The walk back was a special kind of hell. 5 hours of dust and regret. By the time Boone saw the silhouette of his rundown cabin against the moonlit sky, his feet were raw and his spirit was worn down to a nub. His ranch wasn't just failing, it was a corpse. The pond was a cracked, empty mouth. The fences were skeletal remains. He had 12 head of cattle left from the 50 he'd started with. He collapsed on his porch, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. Tomorrow he'd have to walk those 20 miles all over again, just to catch a train back to a life he'd run away from once before. The bank was coming for the land in 3 days. He had exactly $4.37 to his name. Well, $5.37 now. He almost laughed. A bitter, broken sound. That's when he heard it. Hoofbeats. More than one horse moving steady, moving with purpose. And out here after dark, visitors meant one thing. Trouble. Boone grabbed the rifle leaning by the door. His heart hammered against his ribs. 6 riders emerged from the darkness. They were Apache. They formed a silent, menacing half-circle around his house. The man in the center sat on his horse with the quiet dignity of a king. Eagle feathers in his hair, silver gleaming on his chest. This was no ordinary warrior. This was a man of power. Boone stood slowly, keeping the rifle pointed at the ground. "Evening," he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. The leader raised a hand, a sign of peace. "You are the man who helped my daughter," he said, his English slow and careful. Daughter, the girl he'd saved. She was the daughter of a chief. Boone's mouth went dry. "She needed help," Boone said. "I gave her my horse." "Ayanna told me what you did," the chief said, his face a mask of stone. "She said you took only $1 for a horse worth 60. "She needed it more than I did," Boone said. It was the simple truth. The chief dismounted, his warriors staying on their horses. "My name is Chief Takakota. Ayanna is my youngest. The doctor says she will heal because you acted quickly." He took a step closer, his eyes scanning the dead land around them. "You gave her your only horse. This means you cannot leave this place that is dying." It wasn't a question, it was a fact. Boone had trapped himself with his own kindness. "That's my problem to solve." The chief's eyes narrowed. "A man who would sacrifice his future for my daughter deserves better than failure." He turned to his riders and said something in his own tongue. Then he turned back to Boone. "My people know this land. We know the secrets the white man ignores. We know of water that runs deep when the creeks run dry." A flicker of something wild and unfamiliar sparked in Boone's chest. Hope. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The chief smiled for the first time, a slow, knowing smile that seemed to hold the wisdom of the mountains themselves. "I am saying the chief declared, his voice ringing with power in the quiet night, that tomorrow everything changes. Chief Takakota led him away from the others, toward the cracked earth of the dry creek bed. He knelt, scooping up a handful of dust. This land was not always dying, he said. The water is still here. Your people just forgot how to listen for it. He stood and pointed to a small grove of ancient cottonwood trees a quarter-mile away. Your water is there, 15 feet down. My grandfather showed me the signs. Boone stared at the trees, his mind reeling. For 2 years he'd been hauling water, watching his cattle die of thirst, while a spring lay hidden just a few hundred yards from his house. Why are you telling me this? Because a man who saves my daughter deserves to know the truth of his own land, the chief answered. But water is not enough. You need more. He returned to his horse and came back with a leather pouch. Inside were seeds. Buffalo grass, he explained. It grows where other grasses wither. Your cattle will grow strong on it. Boone stared at the seeds. They were more valuable than gold. But the chief wasn't done. The trail past your property, he continued, it connects to the main trading route. Wagon trains pass, but they have no safe place to rest their animals. A man with good water and strong grass could charge a fair price. The idea hit Boone like a lightning strike. A way station, a steady income, a way to save his ranch, but it would take money he didn't have. My tribe needs a partner, the chief said, as if reading his thoughts. Someone who deals fairly. We have goods to trade, pottery, silver, woven blankets. You provide the location. We provide the goods and the knowledge. We split the profits, 50-50. Boone's world was spinning. Just hours ago, he was a broken man planning his escape. Now this Apache chief was offering him not just a lifeline, but a kingdom. Why me? Boone asked, his voice rough. Why trust a white man? Chief Takakota placed a heavy hand on Boone's shoulder. Because a man willing to trade his future for a stranger's life can be trusted with ours. He looked toward the eastern horizon. But this is not a gift. It is an opportunity, and you must prove you are worthy of it. The chief's smile faded. Tomorrow you will be tested, and that proof will not be easy to give. Boone spent the night pacing, the chief's words echoing in his head. It felt like a fever dream. But when dawn broke, he found a bucket of clear, cold water on his porch, and a crude map scratched into a piece of bark, marking the spring. It was real. Just as he was absorbing this, 2 riders appeared, Chief Takakota and a younger warrior, whose face was a mask of suspicion. This is my son, Nalnish, the chief said. Nalnish said nothing, but his eyes were full of challenge. What's the test? Boone asked. The chief pointed to a dust cloud on the horizon. A wagon train. They are low on water. You will negotiate with them. Seems simple enough. Perhaps, the chief said, but they are angry. They have been cheated before, and their guide is a man named Clayton Wells. The name landed like a stone in Boone's gut. Clayton Wells, a man famous for 2 things, guiding wagon trains and killing Apaches. Wells has a reputation for stirring up trouble, the chief said, his voice grave. If he knows you are working with us, he will try to destroy you. So I'm supposed to hide our partnership? No, the chief said, his eyes locking with Boone's. You must be honest about it. Nalnish finally spoke, his voice dripping with contempt. My father says you sacrificed your horse for my sister. Now we see if you will sacrifice your profits for your principles. The dust cloud grew closer. 15 wagons, 15 families, a fortune in potential business, or a mob that could run him out of the territory. And Boone realized something else. What if Clayton Wells didn't just want to cause trouble? What if he recognized the chief? This wasn't just a test of principles. This could be a bloodbath. The wagon train creaked to a halt, and the air went thick with tension. Clayton Wells sat on his horse, his cold gray eyes sweeping over the ranch before landing on the 2 Apache men. His hand drifted to his revolver. Afternoon, Boone called out, walking forward with his hands empty and open. Name's Boone Carter. Welcome to my ranch. Clayton Wells, the guide said, not dismounting. These folks need water, but first I need to know why you're keeping company with savages. The word was an insult, sharp and ugly. Several exhausted families climbed down from their wagons, their eyes darting nervously between Boone and the Apaches. This was it. The test. Chief Takakota and his son, Nalnish, are my business partners, Boone said, his voice loud and clear for everyone to hear. We run this way station together. Wells' face darkened. He turned to the settlers. Folks, I'd advise you to move on. This man has gone native. You can't trust him. But a young woman holding a crying child stepped forward. Mister, we've been 3 days without good water. Our animals are dying. Boone looked at her tired, desperate face. He knew that look. He had lived with it for months. Water is 50 cents a family, he announced. Grazing is 25 cents an animal. My partners will also be selling fresh meat and vegetables at a fair price. I wouldn't eat Apache food if I was starving, Wells snarled. But the families were already moving. Their desperation was greater than their prejudice. Chief Takakota spoke, his voice calm and dignified. We offer only what is good. Wells rode up close to Boone, his voice a low threat. You're making a mistake, Carter. Word will spread. No respectable train will stop here again. Boone met his stare. Then I guess I'll just serve the ones who are thirsty. The woman with the child was the first to use the new well. She drew up a bucket of clear, cold water. She tasted it. Her face broke into a smile of pure relief. It's good, she called to the others. It's clean. That was all it took. Within minutes, a line had formed. Families paid their money, their faces full of gratitude. Wells watched, his authority crumbling with every transaction. He finally wheeled his horse around in disgust. This ain't over, Carter, he shouted. You'll regret choosing sides. As he rode back to the camp, Chief Takakota stood beside Boone. You have passed the first part of the test, he said quietly. But he is right. This is far from over. By evening, Boone had made more money in a few hours than he had in the last year. The settlers were happy, their animals were watered, and Nalnish had sold nearly all the supplies he'd brought. But Wells had been busy. He moved through the camp like a sickness, whispering poison into the ears of the settlers. The mood grew tense again. Just as the sun began to set, Wells returned to the house. This time he had 3 other men with him. They were hard-looking men, the kind who found their courage at the bottom of a bottle. Carter, Wells said, a smug look on his face, these men have some concerns. The biggest of the 3, a man named Burke, stepped forward. We don't like being forced to do business with redskins, he growled. We want our money back, and we want them off your property. Nalnish tensed, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. Boone put a hand on his arm. The business is done, Boone said. You got what you paid for. See, that's the problem, Wells said with a cold smile. There ain't nowhere else for 50 miles. You got these folks trapped, and you're using it to push your Indian-loving agenda. Burke cracked his knuckles. Maybe you need some persuasion. The threat was clear. This was about to turn ugly. Boone saw something in Burke's eyes that went beyond prejudice. He was looking for a fight. He wanted blood. But before the first punch could be thrown, a voice cut through the tension. Mr. Carter, I wanted to thank you. It was the woman with the child. Other families began to appear behind her, their faces showing support for Boone. Wells and Burke looked around, realizing they didn't speak for everyone. Their bluff had been called, but just as the tension was about to break, another man stepped out of the crowd. He was older, with a look of quiet authority. His name was Samuel Henderson. I've been leading wagon trains for 15 years, Henderson said, his voice calm but firm, and I know good service. Mr. Carter provided it. The fact that his partner is Apache doesn't change the quality of the water. He looked directly at Burke. The majority of this train is grateful for Mr. Carter's hospitality. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to find your own way. Defeated, Wells and Burke retreated, muttering threats. The crisis was over. As night fell, the wagon camp was peaceful. Families ate meals of Apache corn. Travelers talked with Nalnish about the trail ahead. A bridge was being built between 2 worlds right there in Boone's front yard. Your father was right, Boone said to Nalnish as they watched from the porch. Everything did change. This is only the beginning, Nalnish replied, a newfound respect in his eyes. Tomorrow we start building something that will last. 6 months later, Boone Carter stood by a flowing stream where a dry pond used to be. The ranch was transformed. The buffalo grass grew thick and green. His herd had grown from 12 to 60. The way station was a landmark, a beacon of hope and fair dealing known on every trail in the territory. He heard hoofbeats and turned. Chief Takakota was riding toward him, and he was leading a second horse. Boone's heart stopped. It was his mare, the one he'd sold for $1. "I believe this belongs to you," the chief said with a smile. "Ayana has cared for her every day. She wanted to return what was given in kindness." As if on cue, Ayana herself appeared over the ridge. The girl who had been near death was now a picture of health and confidence. She dismounted and walked toward Boone. From her saddlebag, she pulled out the crumpled dollar bill. "This belongs to you," she said, her English now clear and strong. The trade was never equal. Boone looked at the dollar. He looked at his thriving ranch. He looked at the family of friends surrounding him. "Keep it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That dollar bought me more than I ever dreamed possible." Chief Takakota nodded. "Some investments," he said, "pay returns that cannot be measured in gold." As the sun set, the ranch was alive with activity. Apache families and settlers worked together, preparing for the next day's trade. Children from both worlds played by the stream. An old Apache elder told stories to a rapt audience of travelers. Boone watched it all, his heart full. He had started as a failure, a man ready to give up. He had made one irrational choice, an act of pure compassion that defied all logic. He had traded his last hope for a stranger's life. In return, he had been given a future. He had gained a family. He had built a bridge. The failing rancher was gone. In his place stood a man who knew that true wealth isn't what you own, it's what you build with others. If you enjoyed this story of courage and second chances, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You never know when one small act of kindness might change the world. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in Boone's place.